So siguro yung iba, dahil nakitang may record naman, chose not to attend. Okay, I'm going to post it, pero usually the next day na. Because by the time we're done today, it's 1 o'clock here. And it takes time for me to download kasi sinisave sa computer ko. So by the time it's done, it will be around 1:30. So by the time I need to sleep. Okay. So we already, where's the chapter? Okay, so I think we end up with this slide last time. The difference between QA and QC. Okay. And if you look at the materials that we have, okay, there are some links that's going to be useful for you for this course doon sa module 2. Okay, so if you look at the study guide that you have there, okay, so we end up with QC and QA last time. So we talked about the accreditation, the ISO stuff, quality assurance, quality management, quality control. Okay. So we will start by continuing what we have. So we could say method validation. Whenever you develop method, it has to be validated. Okay. If you want to publish the results that you have, you want it to be at least validated. You don't want to just release it after what? Doing 3 trials. Okay. For us, we usually validate it. And the way I do the validations, I ask another student to validate the results from the previous student. Okay. So when we were talking about method validation, this is just the process of demonstrating or confirming that the method is suitable for its intended purpose. Okay. Now, the purpose of these methods may include, but it's not limited to qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, screening analysis, okay, confirmatory analysis, limit test, matrix extension, platform extensions, and emergency or contingency operations. Okay, so when you do method validation, this is the process of proving that the analytical method that you develop is acceptable for the intended purpose. So when you do validation, it includes what? Okay. It includes demonstrating performance characteristics. So this is the one that you discussed during your module 1. Okay, so ano yung meron doon? Accuracy, precision, sensitivity, selectivity, and then the R, right? The ruggedness, repeatability, reproducibility, okay, and other, okay, to ensure that the results are meaningful. Okay, so when you do method validation, if we're going to look at it sa step, so makikita nyo to, diba? Validation is just, we could say, looking at if what you did is the real thing. Okay, so first you have verification. It works as I thought it would. So it's usually done by a developer, a verification agent. But if you're a validation agent, the one that you do, the one you do that is a functional expert. So you see there, an expert. So there's some higher degree of, we could say, authority that you have there. Okay, and it usually comes after verification. And if it survived validation, the next thing that you're going to do is accreditation. How useful is the method that you have? It suits my needs. So usually it's done by a requester, user, or what we call accreditation agent. Okay. So when you do validation, you're just trying to make sure that what you did is right, that what you did can be used by other people. Okay. So if you're going to look at this, it's a distinct phase from method development or optimization, and it should be performed subsequent to method development. So you can validate method for one or more analyze, or one or more matrices, or one or more instrument or platforms. Okay. So the method is validated by conducting experiments to determine the specific performance characteristic that serves to define and quantify the method performance. So ano to? Yung mga analytical sensitivity, analytical selectivity, LOD, LOQ, working range, trueness, and other stuff. So it's not easy to do method validation, but okay, it's useful to do it, especially if other people will be able to use it. Okay, so right now you might say, is there any method that you need to develop and validate? Ano sa tingin nyo, class? Nagawa na ba lahat ng method na kailangan to analyze all chemicals that we have around us? What can you say? Are there any more method that needs to be developed? Because anytime you develop a method, you have to validate it. And once it is validated, it can be used. Okay? So let's say one method that you use to analyze water, let's say in soil sample, is different from the method that you use to analyze the same element, but in water samples. Right? So ano sa tingin nyo? Is there a need to develop methods? Anyone?
Yes, sir.
What's your opinion on that? Are there more methods to be developed? The answer is yes. Okay. Every year there are new compounds, and every year there are more new compounds that can be formed from these new compounds. So during my time, we have these so-called emerging contaminants. I'm not sure if this is the first time for you to hear the term. Are you familiar with this term?
No
Anyone?
po.
Huh?
No po.
No? Sino sa inyo nag-180 na? Anyone? What is 180?
Environmental chemistry, sir.
So,
Decem pa lang po ako.
sino sa inyo nakakuha na ng environmental chemistry under, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Ison Pradejas, who is my contemporary during that time. So if you want to know sino yung kasabayan ko dyan, si Ma'am Ami Nison. Okay? So one thing about these emerging contaminants, these are compounds that are used by the population, human population, and being distributed in the environment. Now, they found out before that there's no, we could say, ecological problem from their disposal to the environment, but they found out that there are some ecological problems indeed coming out of it. Okay, let's say emerging contaminants, pharmaceuticals. Are you familiar with pharmaceuticals? What's any example of pharmaceuticals? Anyone? I think everyone taking this thing, right? Can you name a pharmaceutical product? Anyone?
Biogesic, sir.
Okay, the analgesics. So ano meron sila? Paracetamol, right? Here in the
Yes
US,
po.
we call it acetaminophen. So what's the problem? So if you have a lot of acetaminophen, is the body going to utilize them if you drink them? Na ano ba ng body yun? Nagagamit ba niya lahat? Or you have to release them as waste products? So if you release them as waste products, saan napupunta yun?
Sa bodies of water po.
The bodies of water. Here in the US, all a restroom is connected to this so-called wastewater treatment plant. So ano ibig sabihin nito? So pupunta lahat yung galing sa CR doon. Sana hindi kayo nakain na. Okay? And they will treat the water and then release it again. Now, our body don't utilize them. So what happened? They will come out of our body. And then when they go to the wastewater treatment plant, they can be introduced to other parts of the environment. So they found out that the presence of these pharmaceuticals are found in the surrounding. So what they did from 1990s to 2010, they developed methods to analyze it. And one who developed that is the laboratory of Dr. Diana Aga, who I worked with. And they found out, okay, antibiotics. Are you familiar with antibiotics? Anong antibiotics na alam nyo? Anyone?
Amoxicillin.
Amoxicillin, penicillin. Gusto pa ba itong penicillin dyan? Yung puti. Dinidikdik, tapos ilalagay sa sugat mo. Okay? So antibiotics has been used as growth promoters in animals. Now, only certain percentage of these antibiotics are utilized by the body, and all of them are excreted out. And sometimes the metabolites that form are more lethal than their parent compound. And for that, you have to develop a method. And from that developed method, the EPA adopted them so that the other researchers who wants to study the same stuff in their country can utilize them. So for that to be accepted, that method that they developed must first be validated. It's a very good, we could say, research field, especially if you have a compound that you have. Okay. Now, are you familiar with the forever chemicals?
No po, sir.
Okay. Remember I gave you a reading materials last time. So in that, what we called it's a series that you can find in Philippine Stars, right? In one articles on the same series that you have, they discuss about the so-called forever chemicals. Okay, and these forever chemicals are known as what? Have you heard about PFAS? Are you familiar with PFAS? PFAS. First time for you to hear that term? These are the forever chemicals. 99% of them are forever chemicals. The per or polychlorinated alkyl substances. They are around us. Okay? They are called forever chemicals because their chemistry keeps them from breaking down under typical environmental conditions. So the field that they have right now is towards the development of methods to determine those materials around us. So kung naghahanap kayo ng mga thesis project, that's the field that is new. Okay? So I'm just sharing to you the latest that we have, at least in chemistry. And I be thankful if this is the first time for you to hear, at least na-update kayo sa mga nangyayari. Okay? So whenever you have a method validation, it undergoes some sort of a process. And the method is only validated once, okay, it was confirmed that it is acceptable for extended use. So there's a lot of method validation that can be done. Because a method validation is just the end of method development. Okay? Now, let's look at the some concepts that they have. So meron tayong tinatawag nito na Horowitz Trumpet. Why do you think they call it a Horowitz Trumpet? So Horowitz is what? Name of a person. So kung ako nakadevelop niyan, Mohika Trumpet tawag yan. But why do you think it called a trumpet? Bakit siya sinawag na trumpet? Anyone? Andiyan na sa harapan niyo kung bakit siya tinatawag na trumpet.
Yung shape po ng graph.
Okay? Because it looks like a trumpet. That's the common sense, or we could say the simple way of answering that question. It was called a trumpet because it's shaped like a trumpet. Okay? So 1980s, a guy named Horowitz published a relationship between the precision of an analytical method and the concentration of the analyte according to the following equation. So meron siyang equation na dinevelop. Okay? So yung equation na develop niya is predicted RST is just equals to two raised to the raised to the 1 minus wala ko yung notes ko 0.5 log of C percentage. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? Yung RSD mo, what is RSD here? Anyone? Relative standard deviation, or anong tawag niyan? In two letters. Coefficient of variance. Okay. So the relative standard deviation here under reproducibility conditions, okay? And C is just equals to the concentration of the analyte expressed as a dimensionless fraction. So what does it mean here? What's the role of this Horowitz Trumpet na tinatawag natin dito? So the RSDR here appears only to be dependent on what? The concentration and not on the nature of the analyte. So the RSDR here, the predicted relative standard deviation under reproducibility conditions appears only to be dependent on the concentration and not on the nature of the analyte. Okay? The test material or the analytical test or method. And they said the RSDR increases by a factor of 2 as the concentration of the analyte decreases over 2 orders of magnitude. So, ibig sabihin at 100% concentration, okay, of the analyte, the RDR is about 2%. Kaya meron niyang 2. Okay? So, at 100% concentration, the analyte is at about 100% concentration of analyte, the RSDR is about 2% at 1%. Okay, and it is about 4%. Okay, and at 0.0% or 100 ppm, it is about 8%. So yun yung tinatawag na, okay, trumpet, because it clears open. Here, pag nakita mo yan. Okay, so 10%, 1%, 0.01%, 1 ppm, 1 ppb. So anong ibig sabihin nito in short? Pag mamaba yung concentration mo, because it says there, only dependent on the concentration. So pag mas mababa yung concentration mo, mas mataas yung relative standard deviation. Does that make sense? Isipin nyo, kapag mas konti ba yung concentration mo, mas prone ka na magkamali doon sa pagkuha ng composition niya. Look at this, 10%. So the coefficient variance that you have here is just around what? Less than 2%. And then you have 1% composition. So the pharmaceuticals that you have is around. But pag mas mababa na yung concentration mo, yung coefficient of variance mo lalong tumataas. Why? Can somebody explain or give their opinions? Sa tingin niyo bakit mas mababa yung concentration, mas mataas yung coefficient of variance niyo? So maybe it has something to do with the method that you have. Unless you have what? A very sensitive method, then you could say that the coefficient variance that you have will be low. But the lower the concentration of the analyte that you analyze, the greater is the coefficient of variance that you have here. Kaya tinawag siyang Horowitz Trumpet. Okay? So remember, pag bumaba yung concentration nyo, ano ibig sabihin nito? Mas bababa yung analyte nyo compared doon sa sample. Okay? Now you can also look at this in terms of the so-called Horowitz ratio. Okay? So here, the Horowitz function, okay, is now used as a benchmark for the performance of analytical method, and it can be measured through the so-called Horowitz, which is just Horowitz ratio, which is defined as the relative standard deviation, that's the reproducibility obtained from a collaborative trial, over the predicted reproducibility from the Horowitz equation. So anong ibig sabihin nito? When Horrat is less than 1, anong ibig sabihin yan? If this is less than 1, alin yung mas mataas? So this one is lower, right? If it's more than 1, this one is higher. Nafa-follow nyo ba? Wait, just to make sure. Yeah. So, if this is less than 1, ito yung mababa. Okay? If it's more than 1, mas mataas yung RSVR. Okay? Or we could also say if it's less than 1, mababa ito or mataas yung predicted ninyo. If it's more than 1, mataas yung numerator, mababa yung denominator. Now, if it's equals to 1, then they're the same. Okay? So that means you need to do some collaborative trial to determine the Horowitz ratio. And they use it as a benchmark. Okay? Doon sa performance ng tinatawag natin analytical method. Okay? Now, the way that you look at this as a benchmark, so if the Horowitz ratio is less than 1, okay? So ito yung ratio na meron kayo, the Horowitz value and range. So if it's less than 1, you could say it's fully acceptable at a recommended range. Okay? Now, if it's a value of 2 and 1, range between 1 and 2, but the Horowitz ratio is less than 0.3, it is acceptable, but you have to have a reasonable explanation. But if the Horowitz ratio is more than 1, 2, then your method is not acceptable. So yun yung interpretation dito. So ready na kayo sa quiz about this. Okay? Mahirap ba yung quiz?
Sakto lang po.
Sakto in what? Sakto sa pagsagot ng tama? So sakto sa pagkuha ng maling sagot? So dito ko din kukunin yung question. Now, nasubmit nyo na ba yung problem set nyo?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
Sabihin, may i-grade ako. Siguro next meeting, this Thursday, we can answer the problem set. Pero hindi ko i-record. The deadline for that is today, right? If I'm not
Yes,
mistaken,
po.
I said 12 noon, Jan. But I will not be surprised if it's 12 noon here tomorrow. Minsan kasi hindi na ano yung time ano natin eh. Okay? And we can answer some of them. Most of the questions are just similar from the previous course that I have. That's why to someone who emailed that there's something missing, I can assure you that everything is given there. Okay? It may not be clear, but you should be able to get it. Okay? And we will try to answer them next meeting because tonight we will be done with chapter 2. And, or not chapter 2, module 2. And module 3, I will make them available maybe by later this week because most of the recording is available. I just cannot find the module 2 recording. I think it's with Dr. Migo during last semester. That's why I don't have the what we call material or the recording. Okay? So let's go now on the what we call evaluation of QA data. So we have your quality assessment data must be ultimately incorporated in a completely quality assurance program. Okay. So interpretation of this data usually involves both statistical and graphical methods. So in developing the QA program, quality assurance program, there are usually two general approach. So meron tayong prescriptive at saka performance approach or performance-based approach. Okay? So when we have a prescriptive approach, this is an exact method of QA, quality assessment, is prescribed. So here, what do we have? Duplicate samples, blanks, standards, and spike recoveries. They are measured using a specific protocol. And what do? We compare the result of each analysis to a single predetermined limit, taking an appropriate corrective action if the limit is exceeded. So prescriptive approach to quality assurance are common for programs and laboratories subject to federal regulation. So for example, FDA specifies quality assurance practices that must be followed by laboratories that analyze products regulated by FDA. Anong counterpart nito sa Pinas? BFAD pa rin ba siya?
FDA din po yung tawag dito.
May FDA na rin siya tawag? Because when I was there, they have the Bureau of Food and Drugs. Itong FDA dito to sa US, yung Food and Drugs Agency. That's why I'm trying to say it's still BFAD. So, sino dapat ang magre-regulate ng lambanog? Anyone? If I'm going to ask a question, lambanog is usually regulated by A, B, C, D. Anong sagot nyo? Anong sagot nyo? Anong agency?
Yung BFAD po.
Okay.
Bureau.
So usually it's BFAD. So if you read the material that I asked you to read, usually yung mga backyard ano natin, wala silang QA. So wala silang ganito. Right? Wala silang pina-follow na practices. Basta hinalo lang nila yun na yun. I'm not sure if during the COVID-19, meron din kayong backyard sanitizer. Lumalabas na pag naghalo ka daw ng 35% alcohol with another 35% alcohol, makukuha ka ng 70% alcohol. Is that true?
No po, sir.
But that news came during COVID, right? Narinig niyo ba yun?
Yes po, sir. Pero
Or-
parang as a po ata. No,
Or
diba?
is it what they call fake news? I just heard it. Okay. And some other people, they just mix some of the sanitizer. Okay. You cannot mix hydrogen peroxide with alcohol. Both of them can sanitize, but the way that they do it is different. Okay. Dapat kasi yung mga chemists yung nasa isa sa mga front line during the COVID-19, developing those sanitizer thing, the bleach. Bleach cannot go hand in hand with the alcohol. Okay? So, One thing that we can have is this chart. This is what we say a prescriptive approach. Is this the first time for you to see this chart?
Yes po.
So if you're going to look at this chart, okay, so it's just like a schematic diagram, binary diagram, the yes or no thing. And in each of the what we call route, it will tell you what's the problem that you have. Okay? So when you look at this chart, so pwedeng una mong tanong, is the recovery within the limit? If the answer is no, you go to the next question. If the answer is yes, you go to the next question. So if it says here, is the detection limit recovery within limits? If the answer is no, there's a systematic error in the laboratory. If the answer is yes, there's a systematic error in the field. So it's just showing you like a prescriptive approach based on the flow chart that you have here. So to the one that says there, yes. The next problem that you have here is this one. Is the blank higher than the minimum detection limit? Or the blank is higher than 0.1 times the spike sample, and blank is less than 10 times the blank, 10 times the spike sample. If the answer is yes, so you can look at this blank, significantly recovery within limits. If the answer is no, you have here BSL recovery limits, so time-dependent systematic error. It's yes. If it's no, immediate systematic error. Are you familiar with systematic error? You still remember this from analytical? From 32? I'm just trying to review also your background. Familiar ba kayo sa systematic error? Class?
Yes
Yes
po,
po.
sir.
So ano yung systematic error? Kahit anong gawin nyo, nandoon lagi siya, di ba? Yung random error usually ano, either too high or too low. Am I right? Tama ba ako? Your random error causes measurement to differ slightly from the next. Okay? Now, yung systematic errors must always affect the measurement, the same amount or the same proportion that a reading is taken. So, yung systematic error mo is either too high or too low. Consistent yung error mo compared to the one sa random. Okay, so if you're going to look at this, most of the errors are what? Systematic. Okay, so either you can have a poor replication, poor duplicate sample. So the only way that you have a valid data if you have answered this yes, no, A1, A2 within limits, yes, A1 minus AB is within limits. That you have the valid data. So yan yung prescriptive approach. Nagpe-prescribe ka, ano yung pathway for you to consider the data that you have to be valid. Okay? It's hard because you have to develop it. Okay? Now, the other approach that we have is performance approach. So this is any form of qualitative quality assessment that can be used provided that we can demonstrate an acceptable level of statistical control. So here, the laboratory is free to use its experience to determine the best way to gather and monitor quality assessment data. And again, just like the one that you have here, you still use them. Duplicate samples, blank, standards, and spike recovery, because they provide the info that you need for precision and bias. So yung ginagamit nilang ano dito ay yung tinatawag na Levi-Jennings chart. Ito yung control chart. Yun yung tawag dyan. LJ control chart. So yung LJ chart, okay, is a graph that quality control data is plotted on to give a visual indication whether a laboratory test is working well. And you have to look at in terms of the distance from the mean measured by standard deviation. Okay, so you have here a control chart. So ano yung makikita mo sa control chart? Yan. The plot. Okay. The control chart plots the results of the process or an analytical procedure. With your QC samples. So if you're going to look at this, ito yun, mean mo. And if you have here, that's 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviation. So negative, positive, standard deviation. And all you need to do is follow a certain rule to determine if the set of data that you have here is good. So usually, ano dito yung questionable yung data? Maybe this one here, right? Bakit ko sinabi ng mga to, yung questionable yung data? Anyone? What's the reason? Yung sinulat kong pula, yun yung pwedeng questionable yung data.
Too far na po siya dun sa mean.
Too far from the means. It's either too high or too low. Okay? So for instance here, pag tinanong kayo, is this data good? Okay? So ano dito yung sa tingin nyo yung questionable yung data? Anong days? Anyone?
5,
5. What else?
8, sir.
8. Ano pa?
11 po, sir.
11.
17 po, sir.
17. Pwede natin balikan yan mamaya. What else?
25. 25.
25.
27 din po.
27. Now, how about this one?
Six po, sir.
So you have 6,
8 po, sir.
8,
11 po, sir.
11,
13 din po.
13,
At 14 po.
14. That's it, right? So mamaya, titingnan natin kung yung questionable data ba natin i-accept or i-reject. Okay? Meron tayong tinatawag na Westgard Rules. So Westgard Rules, these are, we could say, multi-rule quality control rules to help analyze whether or not an analytical run is in control or out of control. So, mamaya babalikan natin, ito ba ay out of control or in control? Okay? It uses a combination of decision criteria, usually 5 different control rules to judge the acceptability of an analytical run. And usually the Westgard rules are generally used with 2 or more control measurements per run, which means they are appropriate when 2 different control materials are measured 1 or 2 times per material, which is the case in many chemistry application. Okay, so I'm trying to look at the, kung makikita nyo sa sa material niyo, meron link doon about yung Westgard. So I'm trying to go there. Westgard. So I hope you went to that, what we call Westgard things that they have, Westgard rules. So, ito lang yung rules na inaano niya. I'm going to share to you. So, ito yung tinatawag nating rule. See that one? Okay. So, if we're going to have here, so ito yung control data natin, right? And then what we're going to do, meron tayong tinatawag na multi-rule QC procedure. Okay. So the advantages of the multi-rule QC procedures are that false rejection can be kept low while at the same time maintaining high error rejection. So this is done by selecting individual rules that have been that have very low levels of false rejection and building up the error detection by using these rules together. Okay, so if we're going to look at these rules, pa-follow lang natin to. Okay, so the first thing that we have is 1,2S. What does this mean? Anong ibig sabihin nitong 1,2S? I'm not sure. Here. Oh, there. Okay. So ano ibig sabihin nitong 1,2S? Anyone? Ano ibig sabihin ng 1,2S? So this is a mean plus what? So, meron kang 1, 2S na mag-exceed ng dalawang significant figures or 2S that you have here. Okay? So, if you're going to look at here, if you have a 1, 2S, okay, so we could say candidate na siya doon sa out of control. But if you don't have a 1, 2S, that means you're still in control. Okay? Now, kapag yung 1, 2S ay sinundan ng 1, 3S, then you could say you have what? An out of control data. Okay? So ano yung 1, 2S violation mo? So if we're going to look at here, I'm trying to, saan dito ang 1-2S violation mo? Number what? Day what? 1-2S. Can we say this is a 1-2S? Class?
Yes po.
Because you have two significant figures. Now ito, anong violation to if ever? If we're going to look at the flow chart, alin dito yun? Kasi yan yung mga violation eh. Yung parang kapag na-meet mo yan, titingnan mo kung in control pa yung data mo or out of control na. You have to learn this because merong ganito ang bibigay ako in the problem set and then maybe in the final exam. So paano yung 1-2S violation mo? So if you have a 1-2S, so that means dalawang significant figures. So two significant figures here. So see this one? Where are the 1-2S? What days you have a 1-2S violation? So 1, 2, 3. Maybe this one and this one if they're separated, right? So here, ano yung mga 1-2S mo? Day what?
Day 2 po.
Is day 2 a 1-2S? Nandito yung 1-2S, yung yellow. So it should be over the 2 plus 2S or under the minus 2S. Okay? So what is this? Since you have what? 3S, so this is, huh?
Yung naka-show po ata sa screen is yung web pa rin po. Yung PowerPoint po ba yung pinaka-.
Okay, so anong violation to? Nasa red. So that is a 1. Since it is in the 3, that's a 1-3S. Okay? So if I'm going to show you kung ano yung violation, I think I have to put you back in the flow chart. So if you have a 1-2S violation, okay, usually kapag nasa taas yung ano mo, two significant figures. No, not two standard deviations. Sorry for that. So 1-2S refers to the control rule that is commonly used when the control limits are set as the mean plus minus 2S. So if you have a 1-3S, ganito yun. Okay? So you have a 1-3S, that's a common rule when control limits are set as a mean plus 3S and the mean minus 3S. Karan is rejected when you have a single control measurement exceeds the mean plus 2S or the mean minus 3S control limit. So yan yung ibig sabihin nung ano dito. This one. Kung ano yung 1-2S and then yung ano yung 1-3S. So if you have a 1-3S, that means it's an out of control. So let's go to the other one. Okay? So meron kang ano yung kasunod? 2-2S. So ano yung 2-2S? What do you see if you have 2-2S?
Kapag consecutive days po na
Consecutive days na meron kang above or below 2 standard deviation. Okay? And then the next that you have is R4S. So if you have an R4S, this is when one control measurement in the group exceeds the mean plus 2S and another exceeds the mean minus 2S. This rule should be interpreted within run, not between run. So this is how you look at the R4S violation. So meron kang nasa baba ng 2 or nasa taas ng 2 standard deviation, and then yung kasunod nasa taas or nasa baba ng 2. So kung yung 2 to S ay magkasunod na ganito, yung R4S is, I would say, the 2S here plus the 2S here, that will give you 4S. Kuha nyo? So yung consecutive run na kung saan yung reading mo above and below 2 standard deviation. So that is also reject. And then the next one that we have is for 2S. So ano to? Or for 1S. So meron kang for 1S kapag magkasunod na reading mo 1 above or below 1 significant, 1 standard deviation, lagi yung significant figures. Okay? And last but not the least is the 10x. So ano ibig sabihin nito? Reject when 10 consecutive control measurement fall on one side of the mean. So ano ibig sabihin no? Either nasa taas siya or nasa baba ng mean. Hindi siya nag-cross. Okay? So let's try. The next thing that we are going to ask you, itong data natin. So what can you say about day 5? Are we going to accept or reject? Are we accept or reject?
Sir, yung pinapakita niyo po ba is yung
Teka lang.
PowerPoint?
Ano ko yung PowerPoint? Teka, hindi ko po pala. Ito. Yan. Kita na yung PowerPoint?
Yes po, kita na po.
So ano gagawin natin? Reject, accept. Day 5. It's a 1S violation. Are we going to reject it or accept? A 1-3S violation.
Reject po.
Okay? So we're going to reject that thing because it's a 1-3S. Everybody got that?
Yes po.
Now how about day 10? I-reject ba natin to? I-accept. I'm talking about day 10, okay?
Accept, sir.
It is accept.
Accept po.
Okay. Day 8.
Reject po.
Reject po.
This is what? 1-2S. Okay. Are we going to reject, accept, or there's a third term? Warning. When are we going to reject it? Siguro kapag yung kasunod niya ay another 2S, okay, or a 3S, but in that way, it's just a warning. Everybody got that? Kasi ang
Yes,
tanong,
Yes po, sir.
ang tanong sa inyo, bibigyan kayo ng ganito, either you are asked to accept or reject based on the day, or i-identify sa inyo kung ano yung rule na pwedeng i-violate. Okay? Is there any more data that can be rejected here? May data pa ba na pwedeng i-reject?
Wala na po.
Wala
Not
na.
po.
None. Here, this one, They are all warning. Even this one is just warning. But how about this? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, hindi umabot ng 10. So you're fine. Okay, now let's go with the second one. Is there any data here that we need to recheck?
Yung sa
Day
13
13.
and 14, sir.
Okay, day 14. So anong violation niya?
22S po.
Okay, that's a 22S. Now, what if, let's say, instead na dito yung ano, okay, I put it here. Parang ganito. Yung day 15. Will I going to reject also day 15? Based dito sa bagong data na sinulat ko.
Yes.
Yes.
po.
So anong violation ko dito?
4S.
Yung R4S.
R4S.
F4S.
Okay? So ganun yung style natin dito. Is there any more data that I need to recheck? How about data that are warning? Anong days yung merong warning?
S- 6, sir.
Day
Six. Ano pa?
8 po.
8.
8 and
11 po.
11. So ano, kaya nyo? I'll try to see if I can get another one. Bubuksan ko yung quiz from last semester. Anyway, iba na naman gagawin ko eh. So I'm trying to open.
Sir, may tanong po ako.
Sure. Yeah, shoot.
Paano po kung yung isa pong day ay below sa 1S plus 1S, tapos the next day is mas mataas sa 3S po. So parang may pagitan sila na 4S pa rin.
No, when you have a 3S, automatic yun.
Okay po.
Kumbaga, let's say ito, mapupunta to dito. Reject agad yan. Okay?
Okay po.
Kasi yung ano, pag 2S ka, yung 1, 2S, warning lang yun. Pero pag ang kasunod dun ay 3S, ano na yun? If you have the flowchart, right? So if you're going to look at this, so kapag 1, 2S lang, okay, nag-yes ka, papunta ka pa lang dito sa next. So pwede sabihin natin to warning. So kapag 1, 2S, hindi naman 1, 2S yun, in control yun. Okay? So here, every time na mag-yes ka dito, reject yan. Out of control yung data mo. But every time mag-no, pwede yung kasunod yung aanuin mo. Titingnan mo lang, yung parang ano to eh, yung priority rule. Okay? Hindi ibig sabihin nito, oh, kapag no dito, dapat ito ang kasunod. No. It just happens, so pag ito, yes, okay. So kapag hindi, 2S ba yan? Kapag yes, reject. Kapag hindi, R4S ba yan? Okay? Kapag hindi, 4-1S ba yan? Kapag hindi, 10X ba yan? So ganun yung pag ano dito. You need to understand this flow chart. And to tell you frankly, last semester is the first time na ginamit ko to. Sabi ko, wala ata to nung time namin na. I'm trying to see if I can get the, anyway, I'm almost done with the chapter. I'm just trying to open. Squeeze. This module 2. May tanong habang inaano ko yung materials. Okay, so I'm going to share it to you. Kita nyo?
Yes po.
So, ma-data ba na ma-reject dito? Anong data lang ano dito? Pwede natin sabihin violated. I only see one. What is that? What day?
Day 6, sir.
6 po ba?
6.
6 po.
Anong violation niya?
One, two, S.
So day 6, 1 to S. That's all. Hindi mo baka siya i-reject eh. I-warn mo lang siya. Pero nag-violate na siya. Okay? So I think I have another one here. So this one. Anong control yun na violate?
One, 2S din, sir.
1 to S din. Day?
7 po.
Day 7. Let's go here. Kagaya lang yan ng ano eh. Ayan o, tinan nyo. Base dito, okay, indicate if you're going to accept, warning, or reject the following days. Day 1. Alin yung click ko dyan?
Accept po, sir.
Accept. Day 8. So what will I do with the day 8 data? Accept, warning, reject.
Warning.
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 Warning po.
Okay, very good. Day 12.
Accept po.
Accept.
Accept.
Accept. Okay. Day 16.
Accept.
Accept. Day 24.
Accept po.
Accept.
Accept po.
Yan po yung guide. Nagkagulo. Anyway, that's the type of questions that you will be asked. Maybe as in a problem set, and then one during the what we call the final exam. Okay. So the last part that we have here is we measure the measurement of traceability. So in this case, in an absolute sense, the true value can be defined only as being that value directly traceable to the base system of measurement or the derivatives. That is, the national or international standard via an unbroken chain of comparison. So if you're going to look at this, okay, the SI unit that you have there, that's the one that provides the traceability. And usually it's from the certified reference material, laboratory working standard. And if you transfer the accuracy for that one here, okay, that's the relationship that they have. And if you're going to look at this one, what happened when you have the sample, you analyze it by a secondary method, and then you calibrate it by a calibration standards. And then your method, you should be routinely checked by secondary RMs or in-house quality control materials. So it's fairly cheap, larger amounts, matrix match, and usually short-lived. And then, okay, it has to be periodically checked by certified reference materials, which is then certified by analysis using the primary methods that is prescribed, let's say by AOAC and EPA. And the SI units that you have here would be, okay, the kilogram, the meter, or the mole, which is the SI unit. Question for this chapter. Tanong.
Wala naman po, sir.
So may mga exam na ba kayo?
Yes po.
Wala naman tayong exam eh. Ang exam natin is just final exam, and then we just have quizzes from time to time and problem set. So I try to make the problem set less on essay, more on calculation. Tapos yung quizzes is more on, we could say, calculation. Na ano na yung mata ko. Papipilter na ako. Okay. So question. Okay ba tayo? Okay ba kayo sa setup natin? So we will meet Thursday, answer the problem set. It will not be recorded. So sabihan nyo yung mga absent. Okay? And then the next module materials will be available. I think I already have all the recordings there. And then we just meet from time to time, maybe to solve the problem set or more clarifications doon sa mga concept na diniscuss, or more problems or additional problems doon na sa nasa recording. So I usually want all problem solving to be done synchronously. Kung hindi man maka-attend yung iba, I'll just record and send the link to what we call the Facebook. Tanong? It's already 12:56. I don't have any news yet on the other section.